Welcome back to Kings of the North, KOTN Late Night. It's not that late. It's not that late. Northern banger, Northern dominance. Ohio State winding down a dominating win over Oregon. I still think you can make a very compelling case. Let's see what Georgia and Notre Dame do. Very compelling case. These are the two best teams in the country. And one of the best halves, I've been doing this 20 years, one of the best halves of football that I have seen. And if anybody wants to throw out other things, that's a hard thing to do. Overall, one of the best games. I thought the way that Oregon came back was proof sort of how good the first half was for Ohio State, because obviously Ohio State came out, they wrap up a 41-21 win over Oregon in the Rose Bowl, advanced to a Cotton Bowl semifinal against Texas. We'll eventually get to that Texas-Arizona State game, but they're not in the North. We don't care about them as much, and it wasn't as good. It was an interesting game. It wasn't as dominating of a game. I would give credit to Arizona State for hanging in there. Bill is at the Rose Bowl. He's going to join us as soon as we can. I'm going to save a lot of the nitty-gritty ball talk for Bill because he was there and took it in. We're going to save a lot of the vibes, all the vibes, for when Bill gets here to talk about what it was like to be in that Rose Bowl. But I thought Dillon Gabriel in the second half, the way he was able to maneuver and scoot around and make throws on the run and kind of create offense when nothing was there, reinforced how great the first half defensive performance was by Ohio State. Jeremiah Smith, you're always on alert for hyperbole, right? You're on alert for hyperbole. So I don't want to get on here and say, could he become the best player in college football history? Could he become the best current player in the game? He had 8 targets. Ohio State targeted him 8 times just in the first half. That was as much as he had been targeted in any game this year, except 2 games. They targeted him 8 overall in the opener against Akron, 13 times against Oregon the first time. That's how focused they were on getting the ball to Jeremiah Smith, and it felt like Oregon couldn't do anything. This is one of these things. I mean, it's what Herbie and Fowler were talking about the whole game. You know how good he is. You know you can't let him go, and yet they're still able to get the ball to him. The idea that he has 2 more years of college left, the idea that Caleb Downs defensively has another year of college left for Ohio State is kind of crazy to wrap your head around, because as we've talked about Ohio State during the course of the season, they brought so many guys back who could have gone to the NFL, but their 2 best players are a freshman receiver and a transfer safety sophomore. But the depth of talent showed up for Ohio State. And somebody was in here early saying like, oh, we said that these teams were equally talented. I said that. One, Evan Stewart, who had a gazillion receiving yards in the first matchup for Oregon. He had 7 catches for 149. The big deep ball shot for 69 yards the first time in the Oregon-Ohio State game. Didn't play at all. That hurt Oregon. Jordan James, their great running back, who ran for more than 100 yards in the first game, went out early and didn't come back. That hurt Oregon. But even with that, Ohio State had more talent. You saw the way they targeted Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka early. You saw the way that both running backs got rolling for Ohio State. Ohio State did have more talent. And the defensive line showed up the way I think Jack Sawyer is playing the best football of his life. That might have been the best game he ever played. I want to talk with Bill a lot about the way Caleb Downs was used in this game, the way Oregon was able to hurt the Ohio State secondary in the first game. They weren't able to hurt the Ohio State secondary this time. But I'm not sure there's another quarterback in the country other than Dillon Gabriel that could have brought his team back at all, because his instincts, his athletic ability to scoot around and then make throws on the run was kind of all Oregon had. And he at least made it interesting in the final 35 minutes. And again, that to me, that's not Ohio State giving that up. That's Dillon Gabriel taking that with a depleted offense, right? So I watched the Arizona State-Texas game and thought to myself, I'm very proud that I put Cam Skattebo on my Heisman ballot, because I had him 3rd. I didn't have Dillon Gabriel on it. And then I watched Dillon Gabriel in this game and said, man, that guy absolutely deserved to go to New York. And the idea that Ohio State shut down a quarterback that agile with that kind of accuracy and that kind of playmaking ability and that kind of experience that they could do nothing in the first half. They popped their head out of the ground like groundhogs at the end and said, like, remember, we're good. They are good. I hope nobody walks away from this and says, like, oh, I don't know that anybody would. Oh, Oregon's overrated. Oregon's awesome. And Ohio State still did that. Here in the North, right, when we're talking about our Northern teams, you don't have to, like, disparage the losing team. That is an excellent Oregon team, and Ohio State dismantled them on both sides of the ball in the first half. And I know when Bill joined us, Bill was saying as great as the Ohio State offense was early, he was more impressed by the Ohio State defense. That they wound up having 8 sacks in this game. They had no sacks in the first game against Oregon. They had 8. They did not have to blitz that much. They had 3-man pressures with Cody Simon as a spy on some third downs that worked great because JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer and Tyleek Williams were winning individual matchups against Josh Connolly and a Johnny Cornelius in the interior of that Oregon offensive line. So they got that kind of push up front. Caleb Downs, we'll have a 25-minute conversation about Caleb Downs. And then the secondary played really well for Ohio State. And it's a great Jim Knowles game plan. But that's 11 guys. Cody Simon, Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, like in that middle section of your defense, they gave up nothing. They're taking away crossing routes. Caleb Downs was zeroed in on Jordan James early. Every time they tried to, run him on a little swing pass and flip the ball to him, Caleb Downs is like, I got that guy. He's seeking things out. An amazing performance early by the Ohio State defense that allowed, because listen, we had a high score for this. It winds up 41-21. Bill had 42-41 for Ohio State. I had 34-31. The idea here, we thought Ohio State would be able to score, but that they held Oregon down like that to allow that lead to get bloated. It's that defensive effort against what remains a great Oregon offense, even though they were missing dudes, that really set the tone for this. I want to do a big picture question for you guys because this is an amazing Ohio State performance that never would have happened like this ever before in the history. Are we really getting up? So by the way, here's the thing. And like, if people want to do this now, right? I see people in here. Here's the thing. Ohio State earned every bit of criticism with the Michigan performance. And so if we want to pretend, where's the whatever? Listen, we react to what happens. We live in the world. The idea that performance, every question about the team and the coaching staff was earned. Just like every bit of praise for the Tennessee performance and the Oregon performance is earned. So if you're going to come in and be like, oh, why did you criticize them? We're not going to spend 45 minutes talking about the Michigan game. If you don't know why we criticized Ohio State after that, you're blind. This was amazing. This looked like a super team. And this is the first time in the history of the sport where a team with that regular season would have a shot. So I'm glad about that. I'm happy about that. Let them lose. Let teams be imperfect during the year. But we must acknowledge that this got paired up very nicely for Ohio State as a team that was viewed as a potentially dominant team in the preseason. 2 losses, as good of a loss as you can have at Oregon. Literally as good of a loss as you can have. At the best team in the country by a point on the road in a crazy environment. Literally the best loss you could have. And then I think the Michigan loss is literally one of the worst losses you could have. A team with like huge holes that is your rival that you've been pointing toward for 365 days. That would have ended them every other year. They finished 6th in the final actual college football playoff rankings. Never in the history of the sport would a team ranked 6th have a chance to win a national title. This is the new world. We've talked about that Penn State is the program built for the 12-team playoff. We've talked about the idea that the Northern Illinois loss for Notre Dame is the exact kind of loss that the 12-team playoff allows a team to overcome. But that Michigan loss for Ohio State, as good as this team was, we never would have seen it in any other season in 130 years of this sport. So the structure changed in a way that I like, and I think that you like. It's the first time ever. So do you like it? Because the situation is that Oregon earned this. And we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of the game. And I'm going to talk about, I'm here in New Orleans. I'm going to talk just like a scooch about that, give you guys what what it's like here. Of course, as you know, our plan was to do this post-game show after the Sugar Bowl today. Instead, we're doing this now. The Sugar Bowl is going to be played tomorrow at 4 Eastern, 3 local time here in New Orleans. We'll do a post-game show. I'll be at the Superdome live to do a post-game show tomorrow after Georgia Notre Dame. Right now, we know we have Penn State in, we have Ohio State versus Texas, and we're waiting for the Notre Dame Georgia winner to see who plays Penn State in the Orange Bowl. This never could have happened before, so do you like it? Oregon earned through the regular season the right to take a run at a national championship more than Ohio State did. They beat them head-to-head. Now, it was at their place, so it mattered, and they didn't suffer the inexplicable loss that Ohio State suffered. This new format allows a team to overcome that, but it also doesn't reward you as much for the great regular season. I like it. But I'll be curious if there's any reaction to this, because this is a 1-8. I think it was a very good game. There were really good football players on that field today. And I don't think this takes away from Oregon's regular season. I hope the Ducks fans don't view it that way. I mean, Ohio State did that to Oregon. Oregon didn't hand that over. And then you get a couple injuries for your two of your three most dynamic skill guys. That's a huge deal, right? But do you like Ohio State having this opportunity? Because we've all seen great teams that never got this shot. So that's the part of, I think the best thing for college football and for college football fans, and to still value the regular season, is to have your brain say you're allowed to lose, but have your heart say you're not allowed to lose. And to be able to critique and criticize a team during the regular season, knowing that it doesn't kill them. It doesn't end them. It doesn't completely excuse the loss. The opportunity is still there, but we have to be able to separate the view of the game versus the view of the opportunity. Ohio State still had the opportunity. The way they played against Michigan made you reasonably question whether they'd be able to seize it. My God, have they seized it. The way they are playing right now, and that's why I think Dan Lanning has to go in. I don't know that Landis is going to have a ton of time to go in the locker room and do stuff. He's got to wait till they do the post-game show. But of course, there'll be a reaction to this. I don't know that there's anything that Oregon did wrong, that Oregon could have done more or better. Because when you have a defense that is as locked in, and Jim Knowles has a feel for it like this, and you're getting, I have a 4 levels theory of the defense, but you're doing all these things, right? 11 dudes showed up for that defense. There's a bunch of NFL guys there. Okay. And then offensively, to take advantage of that, I think just like you saw it with the Tennessee game for Ohio State, right off the bat, they throw that swing pass. They get to Emeka Egbuka outside. They get Trevion Henderson on a sideline route. They hit a deep shot to Jeremiah Smith on the first drive. You say, okay, here we are. They did the same thing today. To have that little motion where you get G. Scott out in the flat. Oh, they're throwing the tight end in the flat. No, they're not. He's releasing down the sideline and you're off to the races. You knew that Ohio State had an idea of what they wanted to do here. It's an incredible credit to Ryan Day and Chip Kelly to come up with this game plan against a good defense. Landis had some questions about the Oregon defense. I think it's a good defense. I don't think it is a holy defense. I don't think there's, like you say, oh, let's take advantage of that, and that. Is it, again, top level elite as much? Maybe not. But Ohio State attacked it. And Ohio State, after the Michigan game, I said, why does Ohio State play that game on Michigan's terms? Credit to Michigan for getting that game on their terms. It's on Ohio State's terms on both sides of the ball. And so I like that we're here, but it's so different. And I think we're all still working it out. I don't know if you guys want to get to the point where you shrug your shoulders, literally shrug your shoulders at a regular season loss. Because I think a lot of people have said, I don't want to lose that. I want to hang on to the best regular season in college football. So if you're going to do that, you have to act like those games matter, even though they don't end you. So that's where I am on that. It doesn't, I'm glad the opportunity, imagine, but doesn't it make you think, and you guys have this, if you want to list some in the YouTube chat here live, go ahead and do that. Does it make you think about great teams of the past who didn't get this kind of opportunity? They had, in the old days, it was 1 loss. It wasn't 2. You had 1 loss, you're dead. You never get to show what you can be like this. So this is a new world. It's a tremendous opportunity. The way Ohio State seized it, for as low as they were, I think, emotionally, and mentally after the Michigan loss, as defective as the game plan against Michigan seemed, that it has swung. I'm not sure I've ever seen any team swing that hard. The difference between what was that and holy moly, that was awesome. And over the course of this, it like the Tennessee game turns out to be like a little bit of a transformation, right? Because this was the end game. This was like almost perfect, incredibly explosive. Michigan game for Ohio State, 4.3 yards per play offensively. The Tennessee game, 7.4 yards per play offensively. This game for Ohio State, 8.8 yards per play, and it was as high as 11. I think it was 11.3 in the first half. The domination of the Ohio State offense. And so now they're here. And I'll be curious. They've got a shot at this. If you guys watch Texas, Arizona State, I don't have high hopes for Texas to have competed with either of these teams. But again, I think the way this has emerged, I hope we're getting the best version of this, because here's the other thing too. This is what's going to happen now. By the preseason AP rankings, and if you're waiting for nitty-gritty football stuff, you don't want me doing that by myself in a hotel room in New Orleans without Landis. So we're just going to get Landis hooked up here from the Rose Bowl and dive in deep on that game and everything he absorbed there. But this big picture look, from the preseason poll, that was number 2 beating number 3 in the Rose Bowl. Now, number 2 in the preseason, Ohio State, is going to go play number 4 in the preseason, Texas. Number 8 from the preseason, Penn State, is already in the other semifinal, and they will play either preseason number 1, Georgia, or preseason number 7, Notre Dame. So if we had not done this, we're going to wind up, I think, with teams that all along we thought we're going to wind up with 4 of the top 8 teams from the preseason, because right now we already have number 2, number 4, and number 8 in. And we're either going to add 1 or 7. So we're going to wind up with 4 of the top 8 in our final 4. But along the way, the Indiana story mattered. The Indiana story got legs. There have been teams that had seasons like that before, but it didn't mean as much. Arizona State, the opportunity today, they probably should have beaten Texas. That Arizona State opportunity never in the history of the sport would have mattered the way it mattered today. It's a lot of trappings around it. And so I think if there are people who say, well, why don't we just do the best 4? It's because we're kind of getting to the best 4, but kind of fun, kind of interesting. So don't we want this? Don't we want more stories, more opportunities? And you kind of get to maybe where you were going to get anyway. But I'll be curious if there are any Oregon people who now say, and I would get it from an Oregon perspective, and if you want to have another perspective, man, I don't like this. We already beat Ohio State once. Why did we have to do this again? Why did we have to give them another opportunity? That looked like a super team. 2019 LSU, 2020 Alabama. Which version of Georgia would you take? Right? 21 or 22, you'd really take the 21 defense and the 22 offense. But I think there were some people who thought Ohio State had the opportunity to look like that. I don't know that they looked like that through the regular season. Because beyond, I mean, they might have looked like it in the Oregon loss as much as any other game. They didn't run up and down the field on Penn State, at Penn State. Now, that's a credit also probably to the Penn State defense. They had a rough game against Nebraska. They didn't really put it all together until now. But I also don't think teams are intentionally waiting. But now we're going to be in the world of, like, if you get hot and you look like this at the end, all you had to do was get in. That is an unbelievable. I've been covering Ohio State for 20 years. You guys know that. Probably first half of the Clemson semifinal in 2020, Ohio State led 35-14 at the half. It was 14-14 at the end of the first quarter. They scored 21 points in the second quarter in like a dominating fashion against a very good Clemson team after Clemson had beaten Ohio State in 2019. Probably that first half. 2021, 49-0 at the half against Michigan State, a top 10 Michigan State team at the time. But I don't know. I think I could argue that's the best half of football that I've ever seen Ohio State play. And the structure created the opportunity for it to matter. So we're going to dig in more on this. I know a lot of people, you're here to, you want to hear about this game, and it deserves that. But I do just want to talk briefly about what is happening here in New Orleans. The media hotel is across the street from the Georgia team hotel. It is on Canal Street. The terrorist incident where a crowd of people was driven into, at least 10 people dead, dozens and dozens and dozens injured, that caused the postponement of this game, happened about 2 blocks from the Georgia team hotel. It happened at the corner of Canal Street, which you haven't ever been. If you haven't been to New Orleans, it's like a very wide thoroughfare with like a trolley car track in the middle and 2 lanes of traffic on both sides. And there are hotels and restaurants and things like that, but it's not the party boulevard. The casino is on this. There's a lot happening on Canal Street. And then Bourbon Street is the walking street and the party street. And so this happened like right at the corner of Bourbon Street and Canal Street. So that pickup truck was driving down Canal Street and then drove into the crowd right at the corner of Bourbon Street. So it happened at 3:15 local time last night. I was asleep, but now I realize I heard sirens. And so I went down there this morning, and initially I did not necessarily automatically think this game's going to be postponed. Bourbon Street was shut down, which again, normally it's the party avenue. But there were people out there. There were law enforcement out there. There were some media out there, people kind of milling around, but it didn't feel dangerous, or people I don't think were really on edge. I walked around and did some other things. And then obviously, as law enforcement announced that they had discovered that were other explosive devices that were found. And I think it's just the idea of they want to make sure everything is safe. And so that was the next step. I wouldn't say, to me, being close to it, I don't know that I think the city feels on edge or anything like that. I went out to dinner. I went to Shake Shack down the street on Canal Street. There were people out and about, again, a couple blocks from where this happened. But that there was more to it than just one person driving into a crowd. There were other devices. I think, obviously, it's the law enforcement around here just wants to make sure that they have everything in order and locked down before they go and play this game. So nobody here is disputing that was the right idea, the wrong idea. I mean, safety is the foremost thing here. The Georgia team hotel this evening, there had been reports that the Notre Dame and Georgia teams were kind of in lockdown, I think was the word that we used, just meaning we don't want you out walking around. Stay in the team hotel. There were 4 Sugar Bowl charter buses in front of the Georgia hotel around dinner time, and people kind of waiting there. My assumption was that they were there to take the team to dinner so that they could get out of the hotel at least a little bit, but they were only going to let them walk from out of the hotel 10 steps to the team bus. They were not going to let these guys be out and about when this was 2 blocks away that this had happened. So it feels like they've done the best they could. I certainly believe that everything will be safe and in order tomorrow. It feels like the Sugar Bowl has handled it well. It is, an unbelievable tragedy. The reports down here, you guys may have seen it. One of the people killed is a former college football player whose brother currently plays college football, I believe, for TCU. There was a young college student who they showed on the news down here who was one of the victims. It is, I think, this young people. I'm old. I wasn't out at 3:15 in the morning. I think there's young people, which is just makes it even all the more tragic for young people who are out celebrating and enjoying life. But we also, of course, do have to play this game. I'm not here to speechify to you, but I can remember I was working on the East Coast after the 9/11 attacks, and I can remember covering a high school football game after that happened, and a lot of debates about should things be happening. And I know college football delayed that week, but there was a young man who had lost a brother in the World Trade Center, who then went and played a high school football game a couple days later. And that was a game I went to as a reporter. And his point was I've lost a brother. I want to be with my brothers. A terrible thing has happened. But I think if law enforcement can make it safe, and I believe that they can and they will, then if we can gather and enjoy something, life is a wondrous experience. Terrible things happen to people every single day. And if we stop and say something terrible happens so we can't have fun, we'd never do anything, because terrible things happen to good people every single day. So I think people here, like you probably maybe didn't pack an extra change of clothes. You'll figure it out. You'll go to the game tomorrow. Let's go celebrate one of the great things about this country, that we can care this much about a game. Do you know how prosperous and safe a country has to be for us to care this much about a sport? And then, by the way, before the game was postponed, I went down to the World War II Museum in New Orleans, which I never had been to before. It's a tremendous museum. And you're in there and you're just thinking about these people who 80 years ago put their lives on the line for this stuff, and willingly. And they have testimonies of people in there who said, like, I wanted to do this for my country. And it's like, why do they do that? They do it so we can play a football game and care about it. That's why they did it. You do real stuff so we can care about the little stuff, right? So you can't give up the little stuff. I've made a career on the little stuff because of the people who handle the real stuff. So I am eager to attend this great Sugar Bowl tomorrow between Georgia and Notre Dame. There are Georgia and Notre Dame fans all over the place. As much as we make fun of the South and tell the South to cram it, a million times down here, I have been in a situation with a Notre Dame fan and a Georgia fan, and they're just talking and they're having a good time. And college football, I believe that football is the number one uniter in this country. I think it is the single activity that crosses gender and race and age and religion and income. Everybody loves football. So let's go play a football game tomorrow. And let's be thankful to the people down in the museum who 80 years ago made it possible. And let's be thankful. I'm out at Shake Shack. We're on the street where 2 blocks away, a terrorist attack happened. And people are working at Shake Shack to feed all of us who don't have anywhere else to go, because we're all in hotels for this game. We thought we're going to be at a game. We have to eat. And there's people in Shake Shack who are making food for us. Thanks to them. There's so many people who make this stuff possible so that we can enjoy this stuff. So we are going to enjoy it. We're going to think so hard and leave our hearts with the families affected by this and appreciate. You can't only appreciate stuff when it goes wrong. I hope you appreciate every day. I actually don't like it when something goes wrong and someone says, like, hug your kid. Hug your kid every day, right? Appreciate, be grateful every single day. Tomorrow, I will be grateful to cover a college football game a couple blocks away from where a tragedy took place. And it's horrible, and it's horrible, and it's young people, and it's horrible. But God bless football. God bless caring about little stuff, because where would we be otherwise? 5 years of your World War, you didn't get to care about little stuff. There's only big stuff to care about. And now we get to care about little stuff. All right, Landis is going to join us shortly. Again, I think this Ohio State, I think it's good for college football for this opportunity, for a great team to find itself. And the Ryan Day debate is exhausting in some ways. It's crazy, but I think it's reasonable because, and if you guys haven't heard me explain this before, I think two things matter equally to Ohio State and its fan base. And I think that's fair. And I've been around 1,000 conversations with Ohio State fans. What matters more, winning a national championship or beating Michigan? At this point, I think you're 50-50 within that fan base of what you think matters more. I don't think anybody's wrong. It used to be for a team like Ohio State. It used to be for Oregon, right? Last year in the 4-team playoff, Oregon couldn't beat its rival. Oregon couldn't beat Washington. The result was Oregon didn't get a shot. If the 12-team playoff was around last year, Oregon would have gotten a shot. So the whole thing of, in the old days, it used to be, if you couldn't handle your rival, you weren't going to get to the other thing. What is the world? I know Alabama did it once against Auburn. They lose to Auburn in the regular season, and then they win the national title. But most of the time, if you couldn't beat your rival, you were done. Now you don't have to. It doesn't mean that beating your rival, doesn't matter. But I think of it as two paths. And so I think it was reasonable for Ohio State fans to be incredibly upset that the Michigan path was in as bad of a spot as it was, losing 4 straight to an undermanned Michigan team without a quarterback. But they are redeeming themselves. So it doesn't redeem the Michigan loss, because the last Saturday, November 2025, Ohio State fans are really going to have questions about Ohio State's ability to win that game, regardless of what happens here, because it's a different thing. But man, oh man, they are celebrating this, and that's okay. I think it's okay to care about two things at once. So Ohio State can't go back and beat Michigan this year. They can win the national title. And for them to be able to get past that, get past what went wrong, shut down that path, and focus on this other path and play this well, incredible credit to that team, that culture, that coaching staff. But we're not going to apologize. I don't think any Ohio State fan would apologize for being very concerned about what happened against Michigan. But now they're on to this, and they are handling business. Let's bring in Bill. He's Bill Landis. Listen, man, he's stealing Rose Bowl wireless. So we don't know what's going to happen. I think the wireless at the Rose Bowl is fueled by the sunset. So we'll see. The sound and the video, it's as good as we can get it. But look at that handsome fella, Bill Landis. Good to have you.
How you doing, man? I don't have my microphone. I'm talking through my AirPods. I'm hoping the connection holds up. So if at any point it gets untenable, just let me know and I'll leave, I guess. But I'm doing good.
No, nobody wants you to leave. They're tired of me talking to myself. Just keep shouting. We can hear you, but if you want to shout, feel free to shout. Let's start. We want to get in. Give us some vibes of what the crowd was like. This is a Northern banger. This is two great Northern teams in a traditional setting for Oregon and Ohio State. What was it like to be there?
Yeah, it was really good atmosphere. It was predominantly Oregon. I would say 60-40 might be a little generous for the Ohio State side of it. Maybe closer to 65-35 or maybe even 70-30. But the Ohio State fans who were here were into it from the jump. They got here pretty early. They were pretty loud. The Oregon fans were very loud too until they got taken out of the game quite early. But it was pretty packed too. So, I wondered if it might be. I figured Oregon fans would travel because it's not too far of a trip. I wasn't sure if Ohio State fans would, given how far it is, and the hope maybe that they would get beyond this and have a little bit more of a manageable trip for Columbus from here on out. But they did show up. They all hung out after the game, which is pretty cool. The only thing that was kind of weird is they did the Rose Bowl trophy ceremony on the stage here behind me that they're getting ready to take down, but they faced it toward the press box, which was faced toward where all the Oregon fans were sitting. So the Ohio State fans were behind the players did a really good job of basically not taking part in the ceremony and coming over and celebrating with the fans instead. But I did think it was kind of strange that they kind of turned their backs to the Ohio State contingent, which was basically all situated on the west side of the stadium when they did the post-game trophy ceremony.
You were talking during the game that you were, even as Jeremiah Smith was dominating that first half offensively for Ohio State, you were so impressed by the Ohio State defense. 8 sacks in this game, consistent pressure up front. Felt like Jim Knowles had a really good game plan. The secondary covered, no deep, Dylan Gabriel's going to get you a little bit. We understand that. But what was your final impression of how Ohio State played defensively in this game? Again, 8 sacks in this game, none in the first game against Oregon.
Yeah, it was incredible. A 180 from the last time we saw Ohio State's defense. I thought before the sacks started coming, and they kind of came in bunches a little bit closer to the end of the game, whatever they were doing with their coverages and pre-snap disguise, you could just tell that Dylan Gabriel, I don't think, was 100% certain with what he was seeing. And I think we talked about coming into the game that Ohio State had done some more 3-high safety stuff with Caleb Downs kind of in the middle, letting him roam around and mess some things up. And he was certainly involved in a lot of that. But even on the plays where Dylan Gabriel wasn't pressured and wasn't getting sacked, I felt like he was just holding on to the ball longer than he was in the game prior. It was like in the first game, it was like he was holding the ball because he sort of had all day to hold it, but he was pretty certain of where he was going to go. He's just waiting for longer developing kind of concepts to get open. In this game, I just felt like he was dropping back, and whatever for 1 and 2, first read, second read, weren't always there. So Jim Knowles, the defensive staff, Ohio State secondary, did a tremendous job, I think, of just bringing some different looks to the table in this game. And then I think once they got that settled, then the front started getting after it. I actually didn't feel like they blitzed a lot either. At a certain point, it kind of just became like the defensive line started winning in a way that they didn't win in the first game. Jack Sawyer in particular, he has really turned his game up a notch, and I thought he was given the Johnny Cornelius problems all game.
I thought JT Tuimoloau won an important rep early on Josh Connolly that really mattered. Tyleik Williams was getting consistent pressure, and then Jack Sawyer again had a Johnny Cornelius, who's a really good tackle in a blender for a lot of that game. And it felt like, especially on some third downs, Bill, they reached a point where they were only rushing 3, and they had Cody Simon as a spy, and that was really effective for them because even those 3 guys against 5 pass protectors were getting enough pressure to get Gabriel to move around, and then Cody Simon would come up and finish him off.
Yeah, there was that, what was it? It was like 3rd and 17. It was 3rd and pretty long in the second half when Oregon had scored, gotten Ohio State off the field, got the ball back. They're like, okay, I think it was 34-15 or something like that. Like maybe this becomes something if Oregon can do something here. And then they come out with 3 down linemen on 3rd and 17. And I said to the guy sitting next to me in the press box, Austin Ward, I said, well, Dylan Gabriel is going to have all day to throw this ball. They're only rushing 3 guys. And then Jack Sawyer smoked A.J. Cornelius and flushed Dylan Gabriel out of the pocket. And that was one of the sacks, or the sack, I think, the only one that Cody Simon had. So it's difficult, I think, to blitz a guy consistently like Dylan Gabriel because he's so smart and he's efficient. He gets the ball out quick. So I don't think this could have been a game where Ohio State came out and just like threw the kitchen sink at him in terms of different pressures. Ohio State's defensive line was going to have to play better and win some of those one-on-ones, and they definitely did.
Dylan Gabriel finished 29 of 41 for 299 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. I'm not sure there's a quarterback in the country that could have even breathed life at all into the offense the way he did on the last drive of the first half and a couple drives in the second half to at least give those Oregon fans a little bit of hope for a while. But to be as experienced as he is and then be able to move around, it felt like the entire offense was him improvising and making throws on the run. I gained even more respect for Dylan Gabriel in a 41-21 loss because I think there might have been teams that got shut out by Ohio State today. And it was like his individual excellence that allowed Oregon to do anything.
Sorry, I got muted there for a second. No, I agree with you. I think it was like it was similar to Ashton Genty, where it was like he maybe didn't do what he normally does, but boy, did he try to give his team a chance. And I think you're right. I think a lot of other quarterbacks and offenses would have gotten blanked by this Ohio State defense today, but Dylan Gabriel had a little bit in him. That one scramble that he had on the 3rd and 22, where they threw like a 21-yard pass, and then that set up the 4th down conversion that got them rolling, and they scored a touchdown. That was a really good play. They were just, I mean, outclassed, I thought, like by Ohio State's defensive coaching staff, by Ohio State's precision and execution on both sides of the ball, but especially its defense against the Oregon offense. And Dylan Gabriel, I think, tried to do what he could, but it's honestly or clearly wasn't enough.
I don't think it changes the outcome of the game, but the idea that Evan Stewart didn't play at all after he reportedly got hurt in warmups and Jordan James barely played, went out very early and wound up with I don't even know, like not much. He had 7 carries for 14 yards before he went out. Now, Caleb Downs was taking a lot of that away. It felt like he was really zeroed in on Jordan James at times. But those are 2 guys. Stewart had more than 100 yards receiving against Ohio State in the first game. James had more than 100 yards rushing. Without them, it got even more difficult for Oregon. I don't think it means that Oregon scores 3 more touchdowns and wins this game if they have them. But did you think you felt that at all, that there wasn't as much stress on the Ohio State defense with them off the field?
I think maybe with the passing attack, it felt like when Jordan James was out there and Oregon was trying to run the ball with him, Ohio State had a pretty good beat on it. So I don't know that much would have changed because it also didn't even really feel like Ohio State was getting worn down defensively either. I think it's easier to try to cover Tej Johnson when you don't have to worry about another guy out there as much. Like Trayshawn Holden's a good receiver. He was out of bounds on that long play that he got, but whatever. He's a good player. So it's not like they didn't have anybody left. Gary Bryant's a good player. So they have a little bit of receiver depth, and we've talked before too about how Evan Stewart's been very hot and cold. So it's not the equivalent of like Ohio State losing Jeremiah Smith, right, or Emeka Egbuka. But it is a guy. It's a guy that was very instrumental in this game the first time around. So it might have made Ohio State's life a little bit easier, but they had the clamp on Oregon from the jump, like back-to-back 3 and outs to start the game. What was it, 4 punts on the first 5 possessions, and then a turnover on downs. It's like, would it have made some difference? Probably. Would it have made a tremendous difference? I don't think so.
Bill, just so you know, producer Mike is muting us sometimes when we're not talking, just to eliminate some echo. So if you see yourself muted, Mike's got it. It's all good. He's producing his butt off, man. Can we talk about Caleb Downs? He only statistically 3 tackles and 3 pass breakups for him. I thought it looked like at times that there were actually 4 levels to Ohio State's defense. There's the defensive line level, then there's the linebackers, then there's the downs level, and then there's the secondary. And whatever he was playing, I guess it's just a box safety role. But what he was doing, and they showed it on the replay sometimes, of he's just sitting on crossing routes and reading guys of are you coming? Are you coming? I'm going to cover you. And it was that's a really good way to cover the middle of the field. It reminded me a little bit of, people made such a big deal of Isaiah Simmons from Clemson a couple years ago. It's is he a safety? Is he a linebacker? Is he an edge rusher? Now, Caleb Downs doesn't come up and rush the passer like that. But I'm not even sure what he's playing, but it feels like there's 1.5 of him on the field. And what Jim Knowles has arrived at, and it's different than the first Oregon game, that he is never the deep safety. He is down there with the linebackers or just behind them, just reading stuff. Is really a pain in the butt for offenses, man.
I think it's really changed Ohio State's defense. This is some of the stuff I was getting at when I was speaking earlier in the week about what they've done with Jordan Hancock, who's the nickel, and they played him deep more, and it just allows Caleb Downs to be sort of the ultimate chess piece within that defense. And Jim Knowles got the job at Ohio State because of what he was able to do with a 3 high safety structure and creating a lot of levels within his defense that disguises things, that makes it hard to attack. And he just got away from that for a long time. And maybe part of it was he didn't quite have the right pieces at safety, although I think Ohio State did. But he's got the right piece now with Caleb Downs, because he's the best safety in college football, and he can do anything you want him to do on the football field. He's simultaneously their best run defender and the guy who throws a wrench in your entire passing attack while he's just kind of hovering there in the middle of the field. So it is new. It's not something that was part of the plan when Ohio State played Oregon the first time around. It wasn't really something that was part of the plan for the first probably 6 or 7 games of the season. But it is their defensive identity now, is just sort of letting Caleb Downs be the guy that goes out there and wrecks your game plan.
What else about the Ohio State defense versus the Oregon offense that really caught your eye?
You mentioned the other guys on the D-line. I did think Tyleik Williams and JT Tuimoloau played really well again. And when Jack Sawyer, JT, and Tyleik are all going at the rate they're going right now, this is what we envisioned for Ohio State's defensive line. It's taken them 13 games to get there, I guess. I think Cody Simon has played really good football for 2 months. He was I think he was a semifinalist for the Buckeyes Award, but was never really put into that consideration. But if you look at some of his production in Ohio State's biggest games, I think in all the top 5 games, he's had at least 10 tackles. He had 11 tackles in this game, plus a sack and a pass breakup that probably should have been an interception. He's just a really smart, instinctive, and I think underrated athletic linebacker who is, Caleb Downs, I probably more rightly call him the heart and soul of the defense with everything that he's able to do. But I think Cody Simon's right there with them, but he just tends to get overshadowed a little bit. But he played really well for Ohio State last year in a bit of a backup role, and then stepped into a starting role this year. And I think he's even better. I don't know that anyone talks about him nearly as much as they probably should be when they're talking about Ohio State's defense.
I thought there were times, again, with how they're using Downs, that they would just have Sonny Styles and Cody Simon as the linebackers and Caleb Downs as the safety in the middle of the field, and they would trigger an attack, any kind of pass to the running back. They were taking away crossing routes and things like that in the middle of the field. I think it allows the corners, they were talking about it on the broadcast, don't let anybody get behind you, so you can maybe give a little bit more of a cushion because you believe in these guys in the middle. And I thought if Dylan Gabriel had trouble with that, and he clearly did for a while, I don't think Quinn Ewers is going to have more success than Dylan Gabriel did. And then I don't think that Gunnar Stockton or Riley Leonard or Drew Aller would have any more success than Dylan Gabriel did. I really like those 3 guys as able to cover, run and chase anybody with the ball. It feels like they really have a handle on, again, how all these defensive guys are connected.
Yeah, Ohio State's not going to play a better quarterback the rest of this playoff, whether that's 1 more game or 2 more games. Dylan Gabriel is the best guy they're going to face. There's no doubt about that. I think there's So early on in the year, Ohio State was giving up some stuff in the passing game, like nothing that was alarming, but just like you would look at the box score and think like, oh, that team had a couple of long pass plays. I wonder why that happened. And I think it was because they were willing to give that cushion because they don't want to give up explosive plays. But the middle of the field was sort of available for maybe like a run after the catch kind of situation. And with what they've done with Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom and the linebackers, that middle of the field is just like you might catch the ball, but you're smothered the second you catch it. So it's a schematic change, I think, for Ohio State where they've found sort of a middle ground where they're not allowing those explosives over the top, but they're also not leaving themselves vulnerable to the, kind of paper cut sort of passing plays that have allowed teams to sustain drives in a way that was annoying a little bit for some of the first part of the season. So I don't even know who would test that more than Oregon moving forward, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not, Ohio State's going to play good teams like Texas. I don't think Texas' offense is very good right now, but like there's some stuff there to be mildly worried about, and certainly if it were Georgia or Notre Dame or Penn State, like there's guys there too. But this collection of skill and talent and speed and tempo that Oregon brought to the table, if they weren't able to crack this version of Ohio State's defense, then I don't know that there's anybody left in the playoff who will be able to.
I think like it's going to have to be like Texas offensive line road grading stuff. It's going to have to be Penn State offensive line, Notre Dame offensive line, run game, road grading stuff, or an offensive line and tackles holding up better that doesn't allow Ohio State to get 3 and 4 man pressure as easily. But again, I think Josh Connolly and Johnny Cornelius are as good of a combo as anybody in the country. Now, Calvin Banks at Texas, and I guess Texas's right tackle was hurt this game. If he's back, and we certainly think Penn State, Notre Dame's offensive lines have played well. You like the interior of the Georgia offensive line. So there's other good offensive lines. But if Ohio State's going to get pressure without blitzing, because part of what they were doing, again, even since the Oregon game, is Jim Knowles, I think, getting smarter and more effective with some of the blitz calls. And then he just didn't have to do that. Lathan Ransom had a really well-timed blitz where he ran through the running back and sacked Dylan Gabriel. But most of it was not that. So it's going to have to be an offensive line that can hold up, run the ball. And if Ohio State wants to get pressure, you're going to have to blitz, and that changes the dynamic. Because this dynamic, I don't think any offense is going to be able to do any better than Oregon did.
I don't think so either. And this is what we expected from Ohio State's defense, right? Like coming into the season, it was all the pieces they had coming back. The guys from that 2021 recruiting class who were seniors now, many of whom could be in the NFL. A lot of them could be in the NFL. I mean, you throw Caleb Downs in there, and it's the third year of Jim Knowles' system in Columbus. Like, it was all kind of coming together for this to be one of the better defensive seasons that Ohio State has had, frankly, in its history. And it has been that, except for the Oregon game, the first Oregon game. And I guess there was some doubt, and a reasonable doubt, I suppose, about whether or not that might resurface in this game because you're playing Oregon again, and this is by far the best offense that Ohio State has played this year. And it wasn't. It's a totally different version of the Ohio State defense. There have been times in Ohio State seasons where either side of the ball seems like it maybe has figured something out within the course of the season, but it's done so against clearly overmatched opponents to the point where you're not quite sure if it's real. This is real. Like, how could it not be real after what we saw against this Oregon offense tonight?
I want to talk about Oregon vibes a little bit. You're there in the press box. There's a lot of people who have covered Oregon all season who are reacting to things. Mm-hmm. Was it more of a vibe of what is Oregon doing? What is wrong with them? Or was it more of a vibe of, man, like Ohio State, I don't know what Oregon's supposed to do?
The latter. I think there was a little bit of some of the game plan stuff for Oregon was a bit strange. I thought a lot of running on first down that did not seem particularly effective. It almost reminded me of what Ohio State was doing against Michigan a couple weeks ago. But it was mostly, I think, just shock that Ohio State came in this prepared and this ready, and Oregon just kind of got caught on its heels. And we talked about the rest versus rust thing, right? And because we thought maybe that dynamic existed with the Penn State Boise game. It's obviously a different conversation in terms of the talent between those two teams. But like Penn State came out ready to roll and jumped on Boise early. And in this game, it felt like Ohio State was incredibly confident. Oregon had been off for a while and just took some time to find its footing. And by the time it did, it was way too late. So I don't think anyone was expecting Oregon to get blitzed the way that they did in this game. There was the flip side of that is how did Ohio State flip that switch? But from the Oregon side of it, it was just, I think, not expecting the game to get so out of hand so quickly. Like, I think they felt like they had a pretty good beat on it. But I don't know. Like, I'll ask you. Like, I was surprised. It didn't seem to me like Oregon came to the table with like anything like a little different. Like Ohio State, first play of the game, hits G. Scott on a play we haven't seen him run all year. And it just felt like Oregon kind of showed up ready to do the stuff it's done all year, which has been incredibly effective. They're a very good team. It's not like it's a bad plan, but for having been off so long and having so much time to prepare for this game, it didn't seem like they wanted to try to do anything out of the ordinary to catch Ohio State by surprise. And Ohio State, I think, did do that to Oregon.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean trick plays. They tried the one trick play where they put Dante Moore in the game and threw back to him, and then he was going to throw back to Dylan Gabriel, and Ohio State was ready for that. It is really more, and you talk about this a lot. Like, I love trick plays, but you talk like it's breaking tendencies. It's doing some things based off what you've done before. And again, I think we have to be very clear about this. I think most people thought in the first Oregon-Ohio State game, Dan Lanning outcoached Ryan Day. Dan Lanning made a difference. Dan Lanning did the onside kick. Dan Lanning did the 12 people on the field, the 12 players in the field at the end of the game. Dan Lanning was stealing things. Dan Lanning was finding a way. And Ohio State did that today. Ohio State broke tendencies. Ohio State dictated terms of the game. Ohio State came out with the right approach and the right attitude. And so it's 1-1. Like, it's 1-1 on the scoreboard, but I think it's 1-1 Dan Lanning versus Ryan Day. And it's like, you have to do more. It doesn't matter how talented you are. When you play another talented team as a coaching staff, you have to do something to help your team get over the top. And I think we're so accustomed that when we respect Dan Lanning for kind of doing that. And so maybe we're a little surprised that we feel that Oregon didn't do that as much, but you have to give, you talked about it, the first snap of the game, just like the first snap of the game against Tennessee, you got an immediate impression of how Ohio State was going to attack, and they didn't stop the entire first half until they had a 34-0 lead. So there is a great tip of the cap to Ryan Day and Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles and this entire staff for what they had these players prepared to do and the way they chose to attack and dictate, which is not what Ohio State has always done this year.
No, it's not. And it was interesting to me too, because for Dan Lanning, right, like, obviously there was conversation about him coming into the season, like his ability to win big games. Like, he had not beaten Washington. I think people wonder whether or not he'd be ready to beat a team like Ohio State in the regular season. And then he did. But even in the game when he, like, win or lose big game, like, he was aggressive. Like, that was his default. And maybe this game just got to a point where it wasn't worth it. I don't know, but it didn't feel like Oregon showed up particularly interested in dictating anything. Like, they were more like they kind of wanted to come and feel this thing out and see how things might have progressed and get it to the second half and then try to pull away. Then, and Ohio State clearly just didn't want to let it get to that point, which is interesting. It's actually kind of a flip, I think, in methodology from Ohio State, which has been a pretty methodical with its offense throughout the season, and I think comfortable feeling a game out, taking it into a halftime tight, and then really running away from a team in the third quarter. And both of these playoff games, they have come out and been incredibly aggressive from the jump, set the terms, as you've said. And you know, it's one thing to do it, it's another thing to execute it. But when they are doing that and they get you in a hole early, it just avalanches on you, and it's really hard to come back from, even if you're as good as Oregon is.
We've talked a lot this year. We thought Ohio State learned from the Oregon loss. We thought Penn State learned from the Ohio State loss. We thought Notre Dame learned from the Northern Illinois loss. I would expect Oregon will learn from this. So, like, what do you think there is to learn? And what is your final evaluation of this season for Oregon? They were the best regular season team. They were undefeated the entire time, and then they got blitzed by probably the most talented team. So how are we supposed to evaluate 2024 for Oregon? You getting sprinkled on? They turn the sprinklers on?
Some guy started firing up a leaf blower like 3 feet away from me, so I'm trying to move.
Are there leaves on the Rose Bowl turf?
He's using a leaf blower to blow ice cubes off the grass. So I don't know what that's about. Sorry.
People were celebrating with ice cubes.
Yeah, there is confetti and roses on the field though, so that's cool.
Yeah, bring some of that home. Yeah. Have you ever had the chicken nuggets at Shake Shack, by the way?
I haven't, no.
They were very good.
Okay.
Still an A? Can we still give an Oregon an A for this season, even though they lost in the quarterfinals? Or like how do we evaluate it? I certainly don't think this is a colossal collapse by Oregon. I think this is a tremendous year by Oregon, and they got blitzed by the most talented team in the country in the last game of the season for them.
Yeah, it's a really good season still, no doubt. I might stop a little shy of sort of saying an A, maybe like a B plus, because they had played so well. They had established themselves, I think, in a lot of people's minds as the best team, as the most consistent team in college football. They came into the season with championship expectations, and they came up short of them. And it's not like if this was a trade in blows, you lost here the way you beat Ohio State and Eugene, and it's a close like. Then I think maybe that's an A, even in a loss. To show up in this game with all that on the line as the top seed in the playoff and get your butt kicked, I don't think that's an A. I think maybe I would say a B plus for Oregon this year, which is still a very good year for Dan Lanning, who's a very young head coach early in what I think will be a long and successful tenure at Oregon. But it's got to feel like a bit of a missed opportunity with the roster they had and the momentum they had and the regular season they had to win the Big Ten in their first year in it, to go undefeated in the regular season, and then just to play flat in the Rose Bowl. Like it's not a great way to finish it, obviously, but I would say probably B plus more than an A.
Okay. Let's talk about Ohio State's offense. I don't I don't only want to talk about the positives of Ohio State's offense in contrast to the Michigan game, but it is hard not to. I'm not going to start there. Is Jeremiah Smith the best football player in the history of mankind?
Maybe, yeah. He's pretty stinking good, man. Some of those catches on the sideline were ridiculous. And Ohio State has done the thing I've wanted them to do for a month and a half now, which is not only throwing the ball down the field, but get him in space and let him run after the catch a little bit. And they did that in this game. I just don't know what you do. And it was clear that Oregon wasn't going to single him up the entire game. It wasn't going to do what Tennessee did. But even when they tried to give him safety help, like he'll sight adjust and run a slant on third down and beat your cornerback and get 10 yards for a first down in a very similar fashion to the way that Marvin Harrison Jr. used to do it for Ohio State. So I don't know how you defend him with how this, first how good he is, but then also the ways that Ohio State is moving him around and finding different ways to get him the ball.
Again, he's been very involved. He has more touchdown passes, more touchdown receptions than anybody in the country as a true freshman, right? But there's parts of it where I still can't believe he wasn't used more during the course of this season. He had 8 targets and 5 catches in the first half. He wound up with 10 targets and 7 catches in this game for 187 yards and 2 touchdowns. Doesn't he have to get 10 targets every game he plays for the rest of his college career? I don't think you can overuse this guy.
I don't think you can either. I think it's 10, some version of 10 targets, 10 touches if you want to get on the ball as a runner. They gave him that kind of a reverse in this game too. You can clearly do that with him. But there's no excuse. Every game, 10 targets minimum. I think the same for Emeka Ibuka. I guess it's hard to get both guys, that volume of work in every game. But both of those guys just create so much stress for a defense with their contested catchability, ability after the catch, the versatility to be something more than just the receiver. So that's what the offense needs to be built around, clearly. And Ohio State, coming out of the Michigan game where it struggled to get both those guys the ball enough, has built the offense around them in these last 2 games.
I'm not sure. I think it's possible that you and I could simultaneously believe that deep balls were too big of a part of Jeremiah Smith's workload at times this year, but yet Ohio State also did not throw the ball deep enough. There were a lot of deep ball conversations around Will Howard. We talked about during the course of the season that actually, if you look at his completion percentage and his quarterback rating on deep balls, it's very good. But I looked at the Power 5 quarterbacks who played at least a minimum number of snaps this year, 72 quarterbacks in the Power 4 who met that threshold. Will Howard's percentage of deep ball throws of 20 yards or more, of all his total throws, what percent were 20 yards or more down the field? He was tied for 64th out of 72 qualifying quarterbacks. It was only 11.1% of his arsenal. And I think there were games where it felt like they weren't doing that enough. He made some unbelievable throws. The Emeka Egbuka throw that the defensive back tipped, but Abuka still caught for a touchdown. Some of the throws to Jeremiah Smith. This guy is good at that. It is such a dangerous weapon for Ohio State. It's nice to see them use it, but then it goes back to, man, I'm kind of surprised they didn't do it all the time this year. I know defenses are going to try to take it away, but then I would say, I don't care if they're trying to take it away. Do it anyway, because I think Jeremiah Smith and Abuka can go make catches.
I think there's been a real adjustment for Will Howard throughout the season to do exactly what you just said, which is like, maybe it's not the perfect read. Maybe that play didn't develop exactly the way you thought it would. Throw it anyway. And like, you couldn't do that. I think I don't think he could do that at Kansas State, no offense. But he can do it here. I also think too, like they're doing the open locker room right now. I haven't had a chance to ask Will Howard about this. It seems like maybe they spent the entirety of their time between the Michigan game and the Tennessee game, like really dialing in Will Howard's footwork, because that is the thing that kept him, I think, from being a less effective than he should have been on some of those deep throws. But when his feet are right and he's in sync and it's on time, he throws a pretty good deep ball. It was inconsistent, and it hasn't been in these last two games. And these are like big time NFL throws to guys that aren't always wide open, especially the couple of the throws the last two games to Emeka Egbuka, like down the middle of the field. Like those are high quality throws that I might put up there with some of the best I've seen from any Ohio State quarterback. So I think it's mechanical, no doubt, but a lot of it is, maybe more of it is mindset. Just like your default setting being, you're attacking down the field. You're not letting the defense tell you what you're allowed to do. You are attacking them vertically and trusting your guys to go make the play.
Producer Mike says Dan Lanning said after the game that Jeremiah Smith attacks the ball in the air as well as any receiver I have ever seen. He is NFL ready right now. He is that talented, which I think everybody agrees. And again, like, you have to let Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka go win you games, because if you give them an opportunity, I think the idea of when you can see Chip Kelly and Ryan Day coming out with a plan to get some stuff in the passing game or in the run game on the perimeter, so you're stretching it, you stretch the accordion sideways, which then allows you to stretch the accordion vertical, which then opens up Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson. Then you run it. And it's just like, I think it did. Do you think it just took the totality of a regular season for them to really get to where they knew exactly how they wanted to attack? Or did you feel like they did have it at times this year? Or why were the best two offensive performances of the year for Ohio State in these two playoff games? And against Nebraska and Michigan and even Penn State at times, it was like, oh man, I thought this offense would be better than this.
I don't think they ever really had it. They haven't had it the way they've had it the last two games. And I think I might have said this last week, that we've seen in both of these games, I think, the perfect marriage of what Chip Kelly can do for your run game and what Ryan Day does as a passing game coordinator. It's like, for all the fanfare that Ryan Day has received as like a quote unquote quarterback guru, quarterback developer, whatever, it's really his ability to design a passing game that I think makes him an excellent football coach. And I do wonder if him pulling back from a lot of the offensive responsibilities just left the passing game, like, not in a bad place, but just not in the best place it could have been, because that's not Chip's specialty. Like, Chip is an excellent offensive coordinator, but he's much more run game, and building a passing game off of a run game with RPOs and play action. It's all good stuff. But the last 2 weeks, like, it felt to me a little bit more like the return of like the Ryan Day sort of passing game. He's not calling the plays. Chip's don't call the plays. But I feel, without asking about it, that maybe the game plans have been a little more collaborative in making sure that Ohio State is attacking teams the right way, throwing the ball, because it just hasn't looked like this all year. And like, it's Jeremiah Smith being a maniac, and it's Will Howard playing his best football and being more mechanically sound and consistent. But it's designed more than anything else. And they had a beat on Tennessee and what Tennessee was going to do in that game, and they ripped them apart. And this was a different kind of test, and they ripped this one apart too. So, like, maybe the spaced out nature of this playoff, even though it is not a typical bowl season, maybe allows Ryan Day to get a little more granular with the offensive game planning in concert with Chip Kelly, because what we've seen the last 2 weeks is, in my opinion, not something we saw in the first 12 games of the season.
Yeah. Offensive line. I thought early on, like the first 8-10 plays, it was like, man, this Ohio State offensive line is playing great. And they were talking about it on the broadcast. And then as soon as they mentioned it, Jordan Burch got a sack. He kind of went right through Josh Fryer, the right tackle, and got a sack. It was like, okay, this is actually going to maybe be an issue. And then the next play, they flushed Will Howard out of the pocket. They got pressure again. I think he threw incomplete. It was like back-to-back plays where the Oregon pass rush, all of a sudden, you were feeling it. And then that was it. And then it turns out that, I mean, you can find plays. There's Donovan Jackson stoning somebody at left tackle on the outside. There are those interior guys handling their business. There is not a pocket collapsing. Will Howard basically has the time to do what he wants to do. From where Ohio State was, and again, I don't think it means that the criticism at the time was unfair. We were criticizing the offensive line and offensive line coach Justin Fry based on performance. I can't believe how well the offensive line is playing right now with missing two of their best, probably their two best guys, and filling in with probably three, a guy out of position and three other guys right now, at least two that they never really planned on playing this year. I cannot believe how well they're playing.
They're playing incredibly well. I mean, like, you're not going to win every single rep. It was the same thing we talked about in the Penn State game with Donovan Jackson when that was his first game at left tackle. And Abdul Carter got him a couple times. Like, if you line up across from Abdul Carter on 55 snaps, he might win 5. But if you win the other 50, then you've had a pretty good day of work. And this felt similar. Jordan Burch ran through Josh Fryer a couple times. Derek Harmon kind of shoved Luke Montgomery aside on a play or two, but it wasn't persistent. It wasn't consistent throughout the game. I never thought to myself that Ohio State wasn't in control of the line of scrimmage. The run game wasn't like a, run them over type of run game, but it was pretty good. It was effective enough. So I thought it was an excellent game. I think I was down here as they were getting ready to set up the stage, and Mike Soleni, who is the Ohio State O-line assistant, is going to be UNLV's next offensive line coach, and Justin Fry, who is Ohio State's current offensive line coach, like sprinted at each other and like caught each other like in a hug in the air because they were so fired up about what the offensive line was able to do in this game. And it's back-to-back games. Honestly, it's not even back-to-back games. It's really since Josh Simmons went down. Every week it's like, okay, well, Ohio State's offensive line is going to blow this, right? And I guess it did happen to get in the Michigan game, but they've passed every other test. And this one against Oregon was a tough one, and the one against Tennessee was a tough one. So they're finding a way, be a guy stepping up, and I think scheming some things up to help them out too, that has put that offensive line in a pretty good place.
I know you thought Quinshon Judkins looked fresh today. 17 carries for 85 for Judkins, 8 carries for 94 yards for Travion Henderson combined. That's 25 carries for 179 yards for the two Ohio State tailbacks. That is what you want on New Year's Day after a long season when you've been playing two backs.
Yeah, I thought Travion Henderson has looked fresh and explosive all year. And frankly, Quinshon Judkins has not. I think his last couple of games, he's been under like 3 yards to carry or right around that area. And I think he was maybe up around 5.5 or 6 in this game. I thought he looked sudden and was seeing things better and was running more physically, got to the corner a couple times and erased an angle. Just like he hadn't looked like that in a couple of weeks. So if you're going to get both those guys going at that level, then it's just going to help keep defenses honest. Because both those guys can be game breakers. And if someone wants to come out and play Ohio State and try to cheat on Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka, then your hope of your Ohio State would be that Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson would make them pay for that. And I don't know that the pair combined has always done that this year, but this was the best they looked in tandem in a while.
I was doing big picture stuff before you got here, just theorizing on the state of the world. You know how I am wont to do. What do you think about the idea? This is the first time I was saying in the history of college football that a team like at Ohio State with 2 losses, number 6 in the final rankings, would have this opportunity. They are absolutely taking advantage of it. It's literally the first time they would have this chance. Do you think that's good for the sport? Do you think Oregon could justifiably be like, man, what do we have 12 for? Because then Ohio State wouldn't even be in here. The idea that this supremely talented team that I don't want to say underachieved during the regular season, because the Oregon loss was the best loss in college football this year. But the Michigan loss was a a dud. And it's in every other season in college football history would have been like a season-ending dud. And that was it. And especially if it's in the modern era, and then they go to a bowl game and half the team opts out and you never find out how good they might have been. The structure has given Ohio State the opportunity to show how good. It's not a might have been, it's an are. Do you like that this structure gives a team like this that chance?
I like it. I think like I'm not the kind of person who thinks that sports should construct their postseason so that they can guarantee every year that the best team has a chance to win it. Like that doesn't happen in every other sport. I think very rarely, in fact, do we see the best team throughout the course of the season actually go on and win the championship. But this allows for that in college football, which I think is okay. I just want to see. I don't know. I guess I do want to see the best teams in the sport on this postseason stage to like kind of see what they can do. And it's almost it's kind of a second season and it's a new reality for college football. So I get that it's a little harder for people to wrap their minds around. And I think with time we'll become more comfortable with where it's going. But I like this, whether it's Ohio State or anybody else, right? Like if you know any other team in the country was as talented as Ohio State and stubbed its toe the way it did against Michigan, I don't hate the opportunity for a team like that to get a chance to kind of like rewrite its story in the postseason.
All right, I'm just asking this. I don't know that I think this, but I'm wondering if there's some reevaluation of this. And our guy John noted that it's my fault. We did not talk about Michigan's win over Alabama after the Penn State Boise State game when that had happened earlier in the day. We mentioned that Kalen DeMore might get fired before he gets back to Tuscaloosa. We did not give credit to Michigan as a more than 2 touchdown underdog for winning that game. Like 7 weeks ago, Michigan was 5-5, and Bryce Underwood was committed to LSU. Since then, Michigan flipped and signed the number 1 recruit in the country, and they beat Northwestern, Ohio State, and Alabama. Will Johnson did not play against Ohio State. But Mason Graham did, and Kenneth Grant did, and Josiah Stewart did, and Ernest Hausman did, and a bunch of other guys did. I think you have to give credit to Michigan for the way they ended this year. Is there any reevaluation of some component after Tennessee and Oregon basically couldn't do anything with this Ohio State offense, that there is maybe a bigger component than I certainly would have said after the game of Michigan's defense being a pain in the tuchus and having a plan to take the things away that Ohio State wants to do. And when Will Howard threw a bad ball, they picked it off and turned it into points. And they never had a quarterback. But by God, if they had a halfway competent quarterback this year, I'm not sure they wouldn't have been a playoff team. I don't know, right? I mean, you go into we don't need to relitigate entirely Michigan, but I think you have to give credit to Michigan from where they were at 5-5. And oh my God, the best quarterback in the country in your state's going to the SEC. To everything that happened since then, like I said, that is a great credit to them. Do we have to acknowledge maybe their defense was really good in some part of that, or is that still just a turd by Ohio State's offense that day?
Yeah, I mean it's both. It was an absolute turd. Like I'm not reevaluating the turdiness of that performance by Ohio State. Michigan does have a good defense. It has a defense that's very good in a very specific way, and Ohio State chose to ram its head against that wall for 4 quarters. So it's like tip of the cap to Michigan for having good players. What were you thinking, Ohio State, in that game? Like I think both things can be true, but I don't think Ryan Day gets let off the hook for what Ohio State chose to do in that game because Michigan beat Alabama.
I think it might be the largest gap between an offensive game plan and execution in one game and then an offensive game plan and execution in the next 2 games. It is not the first thing. It's not fair to have it be the first thing to talk about when Ohio State plays a dominating game like this. It's one of the best games in Ohio State history. What did you do? You beat the number 1 team in the country in a playoff game and you were ahead 34-0. It's one of the best Ohio State performances ever. I'm not sure, and I more importantly, I'm not sure Ohio State fans will really, truly ever understand how they could do this a month after doing that against Michigan. Will you ever understand it?
No, I was talking with Nicole Auerbach from NBC Sports on the sideline here as the game was winding down, and she came over to me. She's like, "What was that day? Like, what happened? How did we see that and then this?" I was like, "I don't know. I have no idea. Like I have no explanation for it other than I am a true believer now in the Ryan Day has a Michigan issue, and otherwise he's probably all right. So
Yeah.
I wasn't all the way there after that game, but now I am firmly in that camp with anybody else who thinks that might be the case.
Yeah, which I mean, that's where I was. I think we have like even more proof of that. And the thing about this is none of this fixes the Michigan issue. He can only fix that Michigan issue by playing better against Michigan. So you still have 11 months to wait on that. But in the meantime, take care of the issues you can take care of, which is playing two absolutely dominant teams. But I will say, Bill, did this not look to you kind of like a super team?
Yes.
They were always like, oh, no, who's going to be a super team? It's like 19 LSU and 20 Alabama and one of the Georgia teams, and to some degree Michigan last year. And it was like, okay, Ohio State has a chance to be that this year. And then at the end of the regular season, you were like, nope, they are not. And now it's like, actually, maybe they are.
This is so the three like super teams of recent memory, and they're like the teams that get talked about in terms of like all time great teams, right? It's 19 LSU, 20 Alabama, and 21 Georgia. But all those teams are only great on one side of the ball. And this Ohio State team, with the way it's cooking on offense right now, I think looks like those offenses look. I think it looks like those LSU and Alabama offenses. And I think this defense looks like that Georgia defense. Like I don't know the last time we've seen a team that has it the way that this team has it on both sides of the ball.
Yeah. Which then creates a scenario to both praise everybody involved for doing this, and then also be like, but I have a couple questions. Like, why did it take this long?
Yeah.
So, amazing. An amazing performance by Ohio State. I think Texas is in trouble. Producer Mike says the early line has Ohio State as a 6.5-point favorite in that Cotton Bowl that you will be covering in Arlington, Texas. I would like to note that for people who are like talking about Penn State's easy path to the playoff, Texas's 2 playoff games were actually against the 2 lowest ranked teams, because seeds and rankings are different things. Clemson was the 12th seed, but they were the 16th ranked team in the final playoff ranking. And Arizona State was the 4th seed. They were the 12th ranked team. So Clemson played the closest game in the first round against Texas, in the first round, Texas played the closest game against the lowest ranked team. And now in this round so far, they have by far played the closest game against the lowest ranked team. And actually, Arizona State probably should have won. Did you watch that game, or were you too busy getting a police escort and smelling roses and watching sunsets?
No, I watched it. I caught the end of it. I started watching it when it got interesting. Yeah, it was an awesome performance by Arizona State to make that a game. But Texas doesn't look right to me. Texas, especially its offense. Like I don't like anything about what they're doing on offense right now. So like Ohio, I'm actually surprised it's only 6.5 for Ohio State. I guess it's going to be a de facto home game for Texas, playing in its backyard in Arlington, and it'll be interesting for Ohio State too, because I think it could cultivate something coming off of the Michigan game, where like there weren't a ton of people picking Tennessee, but there were enough, me included, that Ohio State I think could manifest an underdog mentality. And I think they could have done it in this game too. I'll be shocked if anyone picks Texas to win that game. So Ohio State's not going to have that on its side, but I don't know that matters. I don't know that's what they're doing right now is fueled so much by media narrative as much as it is by knowing what they let slip away on November 30th and wanting to atone for it, no matter what people think or don't think about them.
That was an odd game. Texas scored on its first possession on 2 plays on like 2 easy throws. And you and I had talked about, we don't think the Arizona State defense is good enough. It's like, it's not. And then they got a punt return, and then they didn't do much for a while. And they let Arizona State
run the ball at all.
Against a defense that we thought you'll probably be able to run against. Yeah. And then Cam Scatterboo, you voted for him, right? Put him 3rd on your Heisman ballot. Yeah, I felt proud. I bragged about that before you get on here. I also I didn't have Dylan Gabriel on my ballot because you only have 3 spots. absolutely. Dylan Gabriel, absolutely. I mean, he earned him anyway, but like I think this performance, he showed how good of a college football player he is. But Cam Scatterbo, I think it turns out even like dragged his team, maybe even more than Ashton Genty dragged his team to stuff.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Cam, they had nothing else. Puke and rally, man. Like that dude was bonkers. So, and I think Arizona State should have won. And then, by the way, Quinn Ewers makes an unbelievable 4th down touchdown throw to keep them alive, which is huge credit to Quinn Ewers. And then he also had like a really nice scramble at an important time. But then there was like other stuff during the course of the game that was like, is it arch time? So I think Texas is weird. And
Yeah.
I think if anybody is having an easy path to the semis conversation, I absolutely, and I don't really think you should. It is what it is. Of course, they're going to change the seeds. We get it. I mean, if you want to write a 10,000 word think piece about change the seeds, it's like, yeah, I know. And I can explain exactly to you why it happened this way. And it's going to be a 1-year thing. We get it. But you have to start that conversation, I think, with Texas more than Penn State. Because, like, if Texas had played somebody other than the 2 lowest ranked teams in the playoff, I don't think they'd be in the semifinals.
I think maybe if they would have played literally anyone else,
Yes.
they wouldn't be alive right now. And like I don't mean that to put down Arizona State or even Clemson, but like Texas hasn't played well in either of its 2 playoff games, or like not a good complete kind of game, right? Nothing like what we've seen from Ohio State or even Penn State so far. So they feel very vulnerable. Like they have pieces that make them dangerous. That defense is still very good. We ranked the Texas defense the best one in the field, right, coming into it when we did our rankings before the playoffs started. So like we have respect, I think, for Texas on that side of the ball. It's just their offense is a little funky at times, and I think like Sark doesn't feel to me like he always has like the greatest feel for what's happening in a game. So, but if they come to Cowboy Stadium, wherever it's called, AT&T Stadium, kind of like on the front foot and ready to execute and play a little better, like they're a very talented team. This is of the 3 teams, I guess it was 4: Georgia, Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, right? So now we get to see Ohio State and Texas, and I think Ohio State's playing much better than Texas right now, but Texas is still a dangerous team in my mind.
Yeah. I don't know if they are dangerous. I might make fun of them for the next 8 days.
I mean, you can make fun of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Quinn Ewers, I mean, like he made a gotta have it throw that kept their season alive, which was like remarkable. I mean, what was it, like 4th and 13? I did not think they were going to get it. I thought they were done. And I might have had a bald cap on and was getting ready to run around and scream that the SEC should have been a 1-bid league. I might have had that tweet loaded. 1-bid league, 1-bid league. And then Arizona State kind of blew it. So, but a great year for Arizona State. But the thing I like, Landis, is I talked about this at the beginning, and we'll let you get out of here if with 1 or 2 more. We're going to wind up, right? So by the preseason AP poll, the 3 teams that are in the semifinals so far are number 2, Ohio State, number 4, Texas, and number 8, Penn State. And then it's either going to be number 1, Georgia, or number 7, Notre Dame. So we're going to end up with 4 of the top 8 in the final 4. But what the expanded playoff and the whole way the season unfolded, the way it evolved in this structure is it made Indiana's great season more relevant. It made Arizona State's great season more relevant. It gave a team like Ohio State a second life that they never would have had before. It made runs by Iowa State and BYU and Miami and all these other teams that, like, it would have been nice seasons, but it wouldn't have mattered as much. We're kind of going to wind up mostly where we would have wound up, I think, in almost any structure. But I think it's fun to get there this way. And I don't think it's a negative. I don't think the fact that we're going to get to where we would have gotten anyway means we shouldn't do it this way. Because I like that Arizona State can hang a banner and Indiana can hang a banner. And I like that Ohio State had a second life. And I just think, I don't think there's as much to complain about. Like, this was an incredible performance by Ohio State. We had an overtime game in Texas, Arizona State. I think Notre Dame, Georgia is going to be really good. I think there's a lot of good happening in this playoff.
I think so too. And I actually think you asked me about, like, do you like Ohio State, a team that had a second loss, like getting this opportunity? And I do, like, I'm fine with it, but I like much more what you said, like, about the Indianas of the world and even little old Clemson, right? Being able to say they made the playoff this year. I like that the season means more for more people. And even if this is a pathway that leads us to 2 teams playing for a national championship that people assumed might have been before the season, although I don't think it is, because I don't think anybody thought Notre Dame or Penn State would be playing for a national title. So that's not exactly what the situation that we're in. I think college football should be like for more than just 5 or 6 programs, and this structure of the postseason allows it to be that way, and allows Indiana fans to get really excited, and Arizona State fans to get really excited. So I think it's cool. I'm on the other side. You can go. Yeah.
Last two. Why is it that college football media like us, the cynical jackholes, make fun of the Rose Bowl sunset for controlling the sport 364 days a year, and then when you get to the sunset, everybody's like, the sunset? I thought Ari was going to melt like Frosty the Snowman in a greenhouse. Oh, my God. It's so beautiful. Is it that beautiful? Is it beautiful enough to end this, that this should have been the national championship game? Are you, you kind of talked about it. You are. You want the Rose Bowl to be the national championship game every year on January 1st.
Yes.
But doesn't the football matter more? Do people, if this game would have been 3-0, would people still be marveling at the sunsets, or were you really marveling at the way Ohio State played? And by the way, there's a sunset also.
It's the best setting in college football. Like I don't think it's
sunsets.
I do. I laugh. I don't laugh at the Rose Bowl about the sunset. I laugh at the Rose Bowl and like when it thumbs its nose at the idea of possibly not playing on January 1st. Like I get the parade is also today. They have to happen on the same day. Why can't they happen like 5 days apart if that's the way the college football calendar works out? That's the part of it that's a little silly to me. But I very much believe that the Rose Bowl should and always be part of the college football postseason. And in my ideal world, yes, today, January 1st, is the end of the college football season, with the national title game always being played here in Pasadena, and then figure everything else out before it.
I feel like parade culture kind of has passed on. Has it not in the digital age? Are people still like parades? I mean, like in 1923, when your choices were like stare at a wall or go to a thing where they make cars out of roses, it was like, I'm going to that. Yeah. But now there's Game Boys, Bill. There's Game Boys. Does anyone still care about a parade?
And the parade's on TV too, so it's like what's it matter? Like I do not care about the parade. I have tremendous respect for the people who build cars out of roses and build a giant SpongeBob SquarePants out of yellow. Like that's great. Congratulations. I couldn't do that, so I'm glad there's people in the world that can do that. I don't know why it has to be the thing that impacts the college football calendar, but here we are.
Greatest parade I ever went to. You know how most parades you go and they like throw candy to you when you're standing along the side? I was at a parade one time where they were handing bagels to people. Ooh, and I was like,
that's my kind of parade.
That's a parade. Yeah. The bagel parade? If it was the bagel bowl, we were like, can't move it off January 1st. It's the day of the bagel parade. You and I would be like, well, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's not. It's flour. You can't eat a rose. Oh, I guess you probably could. Well, do you want to?
Yeah.
But if it's
in France.
In France you can. But in bagel parade, bagel bowl, we should have a bagel bowl. We should write that down.
How do we have a Pop-Tarts bowl? We don't have a bagel bowl. And by the way, like it's the third, and between the third and fourth quarter, they threw bagels to everybody. It's like, here, little pick me up. Here's a bagel.
Everyone's a little peckish. Everyone gets a I like that.
All right. So we saved it for the last 3 minutes of a 90-minute conversation. People do like to say, hey, well, you pick whatever. We both wound up picking Ohio State in this game. I picked Ohio State by 3. You picked Ohio State by 1. Why didn't we pick Ohio State blowouts?
I don't know. I don't know that I felt super confident in that. I also didn't want to be the guy who picked Ohio State to lose to Tennessee and then be like, oh, Ohio State's going to crush Oregon. So like that was a little bit of hesitancy for me too. I did think in the back of my mind that something like this was on the table, maybe not quite this lopsided, but a more comfortable win than the spread certainly would have suggested it being, because of just how good Ohio State was against Tennessee and the fact that Oregon hadn't played in a while and Ohio State had some momentum. But it was mostly the optics of picking Ohio State to lose and then picking Ohio State to win by a lot. I don't know that I earned that, so I didn't do it.
I really think the first half defensive performance by Ohio State was like so extraordinary that I think it would have been honestly hard to predict that. Ohio State putting up 41. Like, I don't know that either of us are shocked by that, but to completely hold down Oregon that way, because that Oregon in the second half, like that wasn't just Ohio State playing a prevent defense or whatever. Like that was Oregon. That's what Oregon can do. And that they didn't do that all in the first half. Because even if if they had moved the ball a little bit, so Ohio State has fewer possessions, if it's 28-10 10 instead of 34-8 or whatever. It's like there's a world where it's like, well, here comes Oregon, right? So I don't know that I anticipated like what I certainly didn't anticipate is Ohio State's defensive line getting that kind of pressure consistently and allowing all the other things to happen, because I do think that's where it started. And I think you started off the conversation here, both sides of the line. I still was not 100% sure that the Ohio State offensive line, especially with Jordan Birch playing for Oregon, would play that well. And I did not believe that Ohio State's defensive front could get that much consistent pressure to change the game and allow them to do everything else. So are we kind of at a point now where you're going to feel like a crazy person if you don't pick Ohio State to win the national title, though? Like, I don't know. No offense. Yeah. I think Notre Dame is excellent. I think Penn State is really good. Because that's the whole thing. And I think that's where maybe people were even before Tennessee. You could be there, but especially after Tennessee or after the first quarter of Tennessee, it's like, if you get this Ohio State. So I think if you get this Ohio State, nobody can beat them. I think that crowd is pretty huge. Mm-hmm. The question has been, are you going to get that Ohio State? But if they've done it 2 games in a row, are we now at the point of thinking, well, why wouldn't you get this Ohio State for 2 more games?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know why you would think otherwise. That's where I am. Like Ohio State, I don't know if Ohio State changed my mind. I didn't know what to make of them coming into the postseason. And now I think if we all have a pretty good idea of what they are. And it's what we thought they would be maybe coming into the year. Just a team that had the most talent, the team that had it going the best on both sides of the ball. And if they ever hit their stride, they were going to be really hard to beat for everybody else in the sport. And now we're in the postseason, and that's the mode that they're in. And I don't think I like Penn State a lot. I like Notre Dame a lot. I don't think they have this ceiling. I don't think anybody in college football has this ceiling. I think the only team that has the potential to come close to it is Oregon, and Ohio State just beat them 41-21.
Yeah, I think that's right. Okay. Did you have a good time?
Yeah, had a really good time. Yeah. And I changed my flight too. So I was going to have a red eye back, and now I don't have that. So that's nice. I'll have to watch Sugar Bowl on the plane though, but I think we'll be okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. So we will plan to have a post-game show after the Sugar Bowl tomorrow. I'm going to be live on site like you are right now. We're going to figure it out. Obviously, a lot of stuff is changing, and we're all going with the flow. But actually, 1-2-1 isn't a terrible way to structure these 4 quarterfinal games either. Because there's a part of me that this was such a dominating Ohio State performance, and I think the whole sport wants to talk about it. For it to be wow, that was the greatest team I've ever seen, and now the Sugar Bowl kicked off. Would have been what? We didn't even get to talk about this. We have to wait 4 hours to discuss it. I'm kind of glad, as horrible, tragic, terrible circumstances. But just if you're planning stuff in the future, I'm not so sure I wouldn't do this 1-2-1. I thought it was weird coming into it that it was going to be 1-3. Why not 2-2 or 1-2? Spread it out. You can own this week a little bit, right? It's still kind of a weird week where people are in between on the holidays, and some people are off work and not. I have no idea what day of the week it is. So you can own a couple of those days if you're college football. So maybe that's something they'll talk about too, as they reconfigure the seating as well. Maybe the schedule might look different moving forward. Okay.
Thanks to Bill Landis for his tremendous contributions from the Rose Bowl. Thanks to our producer, Mike Urostowski, as always. Mike says make it a bread bowl, like a bagel, but like a bread bowl.
Mike's an idea, man.
Because now that would dwarf the Pop-Tarts Bowl if they built a stadium out of bread and played a game in bread.
Cover the coach in a little broccoli cheddar. I'd watch that.
Yeah. Okay, we'll work this out. We have an owner who likes innovative ideas. And if we said we want to sponsor a bowl, here's the idea, I'm not sure the answer would be no.
Worth a shot.
Worth a
you
shot.
Can try it. Yeah.
Our hearts are with everybody affected by this terrible tragedy here in New Orleans. But let's go watch some college football and remind ourselves what makes this country great, and be thankful to all the people out there who are doing the serious things to make all the fun things possible. And so that is everybody in New Orleans right now. It is everybody in the hospitality industry who is taking care of all the people down here. It is law enforcement. It is the leadership down here. It is everybody logistically who is figuring this stuff out, that they had a plan for a year and now they're changing that in 24 hours and they're able to turn that around. There's people, I'm sure, over there at the Superdome who had plans, who are now had to throw their lives up in the air. and cancel plans and do things because now they got to go work and make this game possible for everybody tomorrow. So there's a lot of work that goes into having fun. And we are fortunate to be able to be on this end of it and just absorb the fun. So thanks to everybody out there doing the hard work of making college football great. On behalf of producer Mike and Bill Landis, thanks so much to you guys for being here for KOTN and to enjoy this conversation about an absolute Northern banger and a tremendous Ohio State victory. For Bill, I'm Doug, and that was Kings of the North.